a little late, so let me share my screen. Bear with me for the people who cannot see me well. We'll figure it out by the end of the class. Until then, just focus on the screen anyways. Don't have the prettiest face in the world, so anyways doesn't matter. The slides slash deck slash everything for today is here. So please open this. You can also go to the daily code website that we've created and find the custom hooks track there. So go to dailycodeweb.vercel.app and go to the custom hooks track here. And that's what we'll be doing today. We'll be understanding what are custom hooks in React, why do you need them, how can you create some of your own, and a lot of times the hooks that we are creating today are already very popular libraries that really smart people have created. How have they created those libraries under the hood? How can you create similar libraries on your own? Do you need to know it? Yeah, it can probably help you in a few places where you can encapsulate code well to create hooks rather than having everything in a single component. We'll see what that means very soon. But the goal is, can you understand everything in what is a custom hook? How can you create one of your own? And even though you might not need it for a long time, you will see it in a few places, and then it's easier for you to know what a custom hook is and understand what's happening there than scramble through the code base. So high level, do you need it? No. Similar to you don't need React, you can write everything in HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Similarly, you don't really need custom hooks. You can shove everything in a single component, but having custom hooks does clean up your code base a bit. And a lot of times in good open source projects, you will see custom hooks. So it is a good idea to know them so you can understand those code bases. Cool. Let's get right into it. The topic for today is, what are custom hooks? How can you write them? Before that, we need to understand what are hooks. Again, make sure you're on dailycodeweb.vercel.app. And here, please go to the custom hooks module. What are hooks? We've discussed this a few times. Let's quickly recap. Hooks are a feature introduced in React 16.8 that allow you to use state and other React features without writing a class. Before React 16.8 or some version, React was not written the way we are writing it. React did not have functional components. React actually had class-based components. In fact, when I started to code in React, functional components weren't really a thing. Everyone would write class-based components. Eventually, at some version of React, functional components were introduced. And from React 16.8, hooks were introduced that would provide you state using the useState hook, and also a bunch of other things which are popularly known as life cycle events. The hooks give you access to life cycle events. We'll understand what both of these things are, state and life cycle events. They are functions that let you hook into the React state and life cycle features from functional components. Do you need hooks if you are using class-based components, the components that people used to write back in the day? You don't need hooks. Hooks were introduced because when you move from class-based components to functional components, then you need to, number one, worry about state. Number two, worry about life cycle events. And for both of these things, you need hooks. That's what hooks were introduced for. Let's look at how code was written a few years ago in class-based components and how it is written today. I'm assuming you understand the thing on the right really well because we've written some React code now. You don't probably understand the code on the left. You don't have to either. No one writes code like this. The goal is just to understand how, number one, state management was done. Number two, how life cycle events were triggered in class-based components. And how do you do the same today in functional components? All right. Let's look at this first difference. You can still write components like this. You can write components like this. Both of them will work. React is backward compatible. Just because functional components have been introduced does not mean class-based components don't work in React today. In fact, we'll try to code a little bit and see how you can use class-based components in your React project. Let's compare the code on the left and on the right. Class-based components let's first go on the right because we've done this many times. A functional component that gives you a basic counter. You've defined a state variable at the top using the useState hook. This is what we're trying to learn today. What are hooks? The useState hook lets you create state in functional components And the equivalent of this in class-based components was, this was a class which had a constructor, and inside the constructor, you would initialize a single state variable. You would do this dot state equal to an object where you would shove all of your keys. Could be count, could be users, could be to-dos, whatever state variable this component needs to hold, you would shove that inside this dot state variable. And whenever you want to update state here, how do you do it? You use the second argument here and call it with the new value. That's how we've been doing sets until now, updating a state. And how would you do it here? Here you would have to call this dot set state with the new state, the updated state. This is how things were done. This is how things are done now today. This is how things were done for a long time. Try to marinate the difference, and then let's try to code both of these locally on our machines and see that bhai, functionally they're both the same. They both do the same things. But since you moved from here to here, you no longer even have a constructor. You no longer have a this dot state variable. So you can't use state like this, which is why hooks were introduced, which is why use state, the hook lets you do the same things you were able to do here. The concepts are still the same. The state variable, whenever it is updated via this dot set state, a re-render happens. This render function gets called again in the class-based component. You don't return anything. You define a render function that actually returns the div or whatever you want to render, versus in a functional component, you simply return whatever HTML or XML you want to return at the end. That's another third difference between functional components and class-based components. Let's try to code both of these locally. I already have the code here. So let's initialize an empty React project. Let's first put the functional code here, then put the class-based code there, and see if they're doing the same thing at least. There's nothing new here. It's just a different way to write the same thing. All right. Would urge you to initialize a React project locally and go from there. I'm going to do the same thing. The way to initialize a React project, if you're using Vite, is npm space create space Vite @latest. Go to your terminal and type it out. I'm going to give you guys 5 seconds. Once you're done with that, please go and give it a name. I'm going to call it hooks practice. Select a framework. I'm going to select React. You should select React as well. And just select JavaScript for now. Open this in Visual Studio Code. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to give you guys 10 seconds. Hopefully this is straightforward now. We've done this many times. I'm also assuming you know the next steps. If you want to clean up app.css, clean up index.css. If you want to keep it as well. It's fine either way. You'll have a slightly more styled file, which is fine for this case. So let me actually keep it. Clean up app.jsx though. Make sure you don't have anything here. I'm going to give you guys 15 seconds. Take your time. Initialize an empty React project. What are we doing? We're understanding a basic project, how it used to be written before hooks were introduced using class-based components. All right. Let's kick things off with the functional component. This we've done many times. Hopefully you understand this purely by looking at it. Just going to copy this my component and paste it here. You should do the same thing. It's already present on this first slide of daily code web. Copy over this functional component code. You don't need the import. I think it should already be present at the top. If not, just import use state at the top because it's being used over here, and render this component here. I'm going to give you guys 10 seconds. Let's look at the component. What does it do? It initializes a state variable using the use state hook and then renders the count, and anytime a button is clicked, the count gets increased. There are various syntaxes to write this on click. You can do something like this if you want. You can put it directly here. You can define it separately like it is done in this solution. And always remember, you don't actually call the function here. You just give the function signature. In React, it automatically gets called when the button is clicked. If you save this and open it in your browser, first thing you have to do is, since this is a fresh project, do an npm install. Followed by npm run dev. And then you should be able to open this app locally, which is, you click on the button, count goes up. Simple, straightforward. You have the concept of state in a functional component. Now let's see how the same thing was done in class-based components. Try copying the second thing over. This thing right here, and replace my component with the class-based component equivalent of it. I've just copied and pasted that code. Make sure you import React at the top. Either you can do import component from React and extend component. This works. Or if you want to do react.component here, make sure you're importing React globally at the top. Import React from React and then class extends react.component. Going to give you guys 15 seconds. It's the same code, at least functionally it will be exactly the same. It's written a different way. It's written without any hooks. Notice I have not imported any hook from React because this is how things were done until 2018-ish, 2019-ish, when functional components were introduced. Maybe slightly better. I could totally be wrong on the date, by the way, don't quote me. All right, 10 more seconds. Try it out locally, see if it works. Should most probably work. Let me try it on my side. Still does the same thing. So can you still write class-based components? Yes. Should you write them? Probably not. No one uses them anymore. There are issues in repositories out there that the pure goal of that issue is to move this component over from a class-based component to a functional component. A good example of this is if you go to my GSOC contribution video. This one right here, I'll paste it in chat. In this video, the issue that I'm covering is exactly this. Okay, move. There is a very old project from 2015, 2016. They have a lot of these components. They want to switch over all of these components to functional components. That's what the issue is. I fixed one in the video and a lot of people uske baad fixed a bunch of these. So you'll find this in a lot of projects that were written before 2016, 2017 during that time, because at that time there was no concept of functional components. It was introduced later on. Cool. Quick recap. What have we done? We have learned that hooks were introduced in React 16.8 to provide two things. Number one, state, which we just saw. And number two, life cycle events in functional components. We have seen how state was introduced. Let's look at how life cycle events were introduced. What are life cycle events to begin with? Can I proceed? Is this straightforward? %, love to see it. Let's look at life cycle events next. I've said this word a few times, haven't really explained what it means. Life cycle event basically means events that can get triggered or some code that you can run whenever a life cycle of a component changes. Whenever a component mounts, which means first time the component gets put on the DOM, or it unmounts whenever it gets put off the screen. These are called life cycle events, and a lot of times you need to run some code when the component mounts and when the component unmounts. The way to do that in functional components is using use effect. We have done this many times. We have not done how to do this in functional class-based components. We have done this many times in functional components. So let's quickly write some code that would run some code when a component mounts and then run some code when the component unmounts. Cool. That's this code on the right. It's all so present here. So just copy this over and replace my component locally on your React project with this my component. I'm going to do the same thing. Maybe put some logs in the use effect. And maybe also render something here. I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds. Copy over the initial bits and then put some console.log, console.error, whatever you want to put, so that something gets logged when the component renders or mounts more specifically. And this is something we haven't discussed yet. I'll discuss it in a mild detail very soon, but at least write this code locally. Also, you have to import use effect at the top, so don't forget that. Ten more seconds. All right. By the way, if you don't see my camera, you should just exit full screen in Zoom and you should see it. All right. Now let's look at, first of all, do one thing for me and don't ask why are we doing this, but go to main.jsx and remove react.strict mode from here. There are a few reasons to have this. Gives you some benefits when you're in dev mode, does not give you any benefits when you actually deploy your application in production, and it'll create some weird logs today if you're using it in dev mode, which we are right now because we're running npm run dev. So just remove react.strict mode from here, so we have a simpler application to go through. All right, I'm going to give you guys 10 seconds to catch up and then explore this locally. Basically what should happen, component mounted should get logged when the thing renders for the first time. Basically you should see this log once. Let me open this locally as well. It says from inside my component, which basically means this component is getting rendered. And this is a use effect with 0 dependencies. The use effect has no dependencies, which means the first time it mounts, this should get logged. And if I look at the logs, it says component mounted here. So we have a life cycle event. We are able to run some code when the component renders for the first time. And similarly, one more thing which I had not introduced, I think I might not have totally forgot, is if you return something from a use effect, which is a function, you should always just return a function from a use effect. Don't return any other value. You can return a function from a use effect, which runs whenever in this case, whenever the dependency changes. The technical definition is whenever a dependency changes, if let's say this dependent on to-dos, and anytime to-dos changed, the function from the last render would run first, and then this logic would run again. I repeat, if you have a use effect which has some dependencies. Then the first time the dependency changes, this code runs. The second time the dependencies change, first this code runs. Okay, bhai, clean up karo. This is for cleaning up. Okay, the old effect has gone away. The new effect has been triggered again. And so first cleanup happens, and then this code runs again. And then if to do changes again, then again cleanup happens, and then this thing runs again, so on and so forth. In case of an empty array, it basically means okay, when the component mounts, this code runs, and when the component unmounts, which basically means the component goes away from the DOM, is when this code runs. That is what the significance of returning a function from a use effect is. This function will run anytime these dependencies change or the component unmounts. If the component has unmounted, then this code will run. Or if any dependency here changes, then also first this code will run and then this code will run. Because the use effect is supposed to rerun anytime dependency changes. But before rerunning, it will first run this unmount logic from the previous use effect that might have run. So the first time, only this code runs. The second time, first this runs, then this runs. The third time, this runs and this runs. And when it unmounts, then only this runs. Is this clear? Do we understand the significance of the function that is being returned via use effect? Let's log it first. Let's look at it if it actually does what it's supposed to do. And then I'll do a poll. Let's somehow unmount this my component from the screen. Let's somehow remove it from the screen. Can you think of a way to do it? I want this component to be rendered for 10 seconds, let's say, and then go away. Can you write some code to do that? You would have to write some sort of a set interval, set timeout here. Figure it out for 30 seconds and then I will write it as well. What is the problem statement? The problem statement is this should render for 10 seconds, after which it should unrender. It should go away from the screen. Going to give you guys 30 seconds to try it out and then I will write it. Twenty more seconds. Ten more seconds. All right. So what are we writing now? We're just making sure this unmounts. This goes away from the DOM after 5-10 seconds. The way to do that was put a use effect at the top, which runs once, and after 10 seconds, sets a state variable called render, or whatever you want to call it, to false. This render variable is initialized to true, and after 10 seconds, it becomes false. And here I can conditionally render my component. I can be like, if render is true, then do render this component, else render an empty div, let's say. Something like this. So this is what I was expecting in this part. Okay, you introduce an effect which after 10 seconds does what? Sets a state variable to false. And only if this state variable is true, we render my component, else we render an empty div. Is this part clear? How rendering and unrendering of this component happens? Because if this is clear, then the next part should hopefully be straightforward. Let me quickly do a poll. %. Let me finish this and then I'll take a pause and recap. What is happening is after 10 seconds, this component will go away from the screen. This div, second div will get logged. You can also change the code a bit to be like if render, then return a div that says second div, else return my component. This syntax works as well. You can either do this, okay, by if the state variable is true, or more specifically not true, then render the second div, else render my component. Or you can use the slightly cleaner syntax that I wrote, which was, don't have this, simply do if render is true, then return this, else return an empty div. This is the ternary operator, which might have been good for me to introduce now that I think of it. So you can simply do the other code as well, which is have an if statement here. If render is not true, return an empty div. Else return my component. Both the syntax will do the same thing, which is after 10 seconds, take my component away from the screen. Let's look at what this translates to in the browser. If I go to the browser now, I see from inside my component rendered for 10 seconds. And after 10 seconds, look at what happens. It goes away from here. But what is the other thing that happened? Component unmounted got logged. What does that tell you? That tells you that when this component went away from the screen, this code got called. This use effect had two parts of code bases. This part, which ran when the component mounted, and then this part, which ran when the component unmounted. So these are what are called life cycle events. Whenever this component mounts, that is a life cycle event. Whenever this component unmounts, that is also a life cycle event. And now you can run some code anytime these life cycle events happen. You can also change this code a bit. Let me make this a set interval. Okay, by every 5 seconds, let me set render to the opposite of it. What will this do? This will take the current value and set it to the opposite of it. If it was true, it will make it false. If it was false, it will make it true. It will basically keep switching the render variable every 5 seconds, which means this component will mount and then unmount and then mount and then unmount, so on and so forth. So you should see these logs come up one by one. Let's save this and refresh, and you will see component mounted. I see it on the screen, and after 5 seconds, it goes away. Component unmounted, and after 5 seconds, component mounted, so on and so forth. So this is one way for you to hook into lifecycle events for functional components. Is this clear? I'm going to copy this current code and paste it so you guys can see the exact thing. But 85% is clear, 15% isn't clear, which isn't great. But let me paste the current code. Now, if you go here to daily code and refresh, you should see the functional solution that you can just copy over on your side and try the same thing on your side. If you don't understand this one, it is mostly fine. What you want to understand is the difference as to how this was done before and after. And eventually I'm happy to discuss this at the end as well. We won't be using these at all today, specifically, mount and unmount events. So we're not going to do too much of lifecycle events today. So if you don't understand this, it is mostly fine. Let's proceed a bit and then happy to discuss this at the end. The thing that I wanted to show was the class-based components and how they would do the same thing before hooks were introduced. So the use effect hook lets you hook into the lifecycle events. If I replace this with class-based components, this was much easier. No need for use effect, no need for a function to return. you could simply write a function like this. Okay, bhai, component did mount, run something. Component will unmount, unmounted, and then render whatever you want here. This is how lifecycle events were hooked into until class-based components. Today, as you can see, it's much harder. You have to use a use effect. The use effect needs to return a function, which is slightly complicated syntax, but that is the syntax to follow today, unfortunately. The syntax was, as you can see, much cleaner up until a few years ago, where you would simply get component did mount as a function that you could define, component will unmount as a function that you could define, and you can just write all of your lifecycle logic here. Let's see if this actually works as well. I'm going to give you guys 20 seconds to copy this code locally on your machine. All right. Make sure you've imported React at the top. I have. And now try to run the same code. You'll pretty much see the same thing. Only the syntax is much cleaner. Let me go to my browser. Refresh. I see hi there. I see component mounted. After 5 seconds, it goes away. I see unmounted. And it comes back, so on and so forth. So what have we learned? We have learned that this was the way to do lifecycle events until functional components were introduced. And after functional components were introduced, the way to do lifecycle events is using use effect. This code and this code are the same. This code and this code are the same. If you don't understand use effect very well right now, it is fine. I'll discuss it again at the end of the class. That's a high level of hooks. That's what hooks let you do. Until now, we've discussed a few types of hooks. We have understood use state lets you do state. Use effect lets you hook into lifecycle events. Use memo, if you remember, use callback, let you do some more performance optimizations. These hooks are provided to you by the React library, but you can write hooks of your own, which are what are called custom hooks, which is what the class for today is. So the next section, let's try to write some hooks of our own that other people can use. Just how you can use effect and use state, you can define hooks that other people can use. Let's see how you can write them. What are they supposed to do? What are the common use cases that custom hooks tend to tackle? All right. Pause, take a breather. We're moving on to the next section, which is what are custom hooks? Take 20 seconds, take a breather. Try to marinate the slides from the first section. Difference between class-based components and functional components, how to do state, how to do lifecycle events. A bunch of popular React hooks. And what are we doing? A bunch of popular custom hooks, not popular custom hooks, like standard custom hooks that are good for you to know / write on your own. All right, let's proceed. What are custom hooks? So if you did not understand anything until this point, feel free to take a breather. It's fine. Let's move on to writing some custom hooks. We'll come back to slide 1 again. What are custom hooks? Hooks that you can create yourself so other people can use them are called custom hooks. A custom hook is effectively a function. It is just a function, but it has two special properties. Number one, it uses another hook internally, like use state, use effect, or another custom hook. And it starts with use. You cannot define a hook that has the name Harkirat or that has the name do something. It should start with use. It should be use Harkirat or it should be use do something. All right. It should always start with use, and it should always use a different hook. Else it's just a normal function. If a hook, a custom hook that you're defining, does not use another hook, then it's just a normal function. You can call it as a normal function. What makes it a custom hook is that it is internally using another hook. We'll see what that means very soon. A few good examples of this are Data fetching hooks, that's the first category of hooks that we will write. Browser functionality related hooks, and performance or timer based hooks. We'll get to what all three of these are. Let's kick things off with just the first one, which is data fetching hooks. Writing some hooks that let you fetch data from the backend, so you don't have to do some ugly code that we've been doing until now. Let's go to the next slide and understand what are data fetching hooks. Data fetching hooks can be used to encapsulate all the logic to fetch data from your backend. What are they supposed to do? Encapsulate all the logic to get your data from the backend. For example, look at the following code. What does this code do? It renders a bunch of to-dos that you can get from this backend server. So if you open this backend server, let me open this in a new tab. It returns you a list of randomly generated to-dos anytime you hit this endpoint. If you go to sum-server.100xdevs.com/to-dos, it gives you a list of randomly generated to-dos. And if you want to create an application that renders them, this is what the code for it looks like. Take 30 seconds and marinate this code. I'm hoping you understand this code very well by now. If there is any part of this code that's not clear, please post in Q&A. The link for the slides is right here. You can just go to this website, daily-code-web.vercel.app. For people who said Axios isn't clear, there is a video that's posted yesterday, 8.3. Go to it. It explains the clear difference between Axios and Fetch. Long story short, it's just another way to hit the backend servers. For the people who are not able to come to the slides, this is the link to the slides, dailycode-web.vercel.app. Right. Great. Assuming most people understand this, we have done this many times. Let's copy this over and make sure it actually runs. You have a basic functioning to-do application. If I go here, it says Axios does not exist. This is the library that we are using to send backend requests. Hopefully this is clear. Rather than using Fetch, over here, I'm using Axios. What is Axios and how is it different from Fetch? We have discussed yesterday in an offline video. After running npm install Axios, if I run npm run dev, I see to-do 1, this is to-do 1. If I refresh, I see to-do 1, this is to-do 2. It keeps on changing. It's a randomly generated list that you get every time you hit the backend server. But there is a problem here. The problem is not really a problem. It's more like how ugly this code is. You have shoved everything inside a single component. I repeat, this logic that, first sets to-dos as an empty state. Then there is a use effect that actually hits the backend, gets back the response and sets to-dos in state. Then finally you render it. It's all shoved inside a single app component. This is the problem that custom hooks take away. What if you could write a hook of your own so that the application simply becomes this? Rather than doing all of this, what if you could write a hook that looks something like this? Use to-dos. No need for any of this. And this would give you the list of to-dos. This would do the heavy lifting of hitting the backend, getting back the data from the backend and putting into this to-dos variable. What if you could do something like this rather than writing all of the logic here? This is what is called a data fetching hook, a hook that you can create that actually fetches the data from the backend and stores it in a single variable, returns that single variable rather than you having to do all of this logic here. Why is this good? Number one, it is much cleaner. There's a single place where you're storing all of this logic. Number two, if this logic ever changes, you don't have to change that logic in multiple places. Let's say this to do's you need in 10 different places, and all these 10 different places you are doing this logic. Rather than doing that, you can simply encapsulate all of it in a single hook, and then everyone can use that hook rather than making changes in 10 different places. All right, that's the benefit of describing everything in a separate hook. Let's try to write the hook. Let's see how it works and then go from there. The first thing I said was first try to reach at this point, I guess. So take 30 seconds and make sure you have the code running locally, which is able to hit a backend server and render all the to-dos. I'm going to wait. Make sure you have to-dos rendering on screen. Eventually, the goal is for us to write a bunch of things that take us very close to this very popular library called SWR. This is a very popular library, which as you can see says React hooks for data fetching. We are trying to write this library ourselves, but eventually we will see you could have just used this library rather than, writing all of this on your own. All right, cool. 15 more seconds and then we'll proceed. This is the code that you need to have locally on your machine. All right. Let's try to create a hook of our own. What did I say? A hook is effectively a function. So you effectively have to create a function which starts with use. So you can name it whatever you want. You need to make sure it starts with use. And here you will write all the logic to actually fetch data from the backend. Effectively, really what you have to do is move all of this logic from here over to here. And this function will return just to-dos. This is what was expected to create your own custom hook called use to-dos. Now, anyone who wants to get the list of to-dos from the backend can simply do const to-dos equal to use to-dos rather than, writing all of this logic in the main functional component, which sort of, just makes it a little ugly. This makes it a little more cleaner, defining it separately. This was what was expected to create your own custom hook called use to-dos. Take 15-20 seconds, try to run it locally, see if it works for you. Eventually we'll make variations of this, but this is a good start. This is what was expected for you to create your very first hook. This is the simplest hook that you can sort of create that encapsulates all the logic of hitting the backend server and storing this in a single variable. Notice I'm only returning to-dos. I'm not returning, to-dos and set to-dos from here, because I know whoever wants to use it, they only need the final value. They don't ever want to update it. The updation logic only happens here, which is why I only return to-dos, the final list of to-dos. I don't need to return the set function. All right, save it. I'm going to wait for 15 seconds, hoping this is not too difficult and you understand how can you create your very first custom hook. All right, let's see if it works. It does seem to work. If I refresh, I still see to-dos, but my main function is much cleaner. Const to-dos equal to use to-dos and then render them. I don't have to worry about, hitting all of this logic. There can be a different engineer who can, write all of the hooks, a more backend heavy engineer, and the designer of the team or, the front end developer can simply worry about get all the to-dos like this and render them over here. That's another good reason to encapsulate all your backend heavy calls in separate hooks. Is this clear? Good. Great. 91% is beautiful. Now let's create some variations of this. The people who created that library that I just showed you that we're trying to achieve, they didn't do this much. This was pretty simple, right? The things that you can introduce here are, number one, you can change this to by to-dos, loading. As we know, this is an asynchronous call. And if you look at the website here, you see an empty to-do list for like a second or so, after which you see the whole thing, because it takes some time for the backend to return you the data. Wouldn't it be nice if you could show a loader here or show loading ... here when the data was actually coming back from the server? How can you change this hook so that this returns not one thing, but two things, to-dos and loading, whether or not the data is still loading from the backend, so that if the data is still loading, you can render something else. You can be like, if loading, return div loading ... so that the user sees some feedback. Okay, acha, the data is coming back from the backend. And then if not loading, then control will reach beyond this and this gets rendered. If this syntax feels weird, you can always write the other syntax that I showed you before. Loading ? Show loading, else render all the to-dos. So either one of these syntax is fine. I am going to use the first syntax, which is if loading, return div loading, else return this. How can I change this hook so that it returns two things? The loading variable should represent whether or not this backend call has succeeded. If it has succeeded, loading should become false. If it is still in progress, then loading should be true. Can you think of a few changes to make here? Going to give you guys 20 seconds and then I will write it myself. Try to figure out what this should be. All right. Hopefully you were able to figure it out. The solution is, okay, you can initialize const loading, set loading equal to use state true. And then when this request actually succeeds, when the control actually reaches here, you can do set loading false. And that's it. Now you have loading, which gets returned here, initially set to true. And then whenever this call succeeds, irrespective of if it takes 1 second or 10 seconds, to-dos gets set and loading gets set to false, which means whoever is using loading gets set to false. So it will skip from here and the actual to-dos will get printed on the screen. You have a slightly more feedback driven website where you first see loading and then you see all the to-dos when the backend request succeeds. If I save this and if I refresh, you will see loading for a brief second and then you see all of these to-dos. That was what was expected. If you want to see this slightly better, you can add a fake timer here. Only after 5 seconds you send the request. So you see loading for some extra time, but I hope you see it for at least a brief second, which is basically the time it takes for the data to come back. You can make this more pretty. You can put more skeletons here. Skeletons are basically loaders that you see when you go to fancy websites today. For example, if I go to Twitter, you see these loaders or skeletons are basically, divs that sort of sparkle a bit. You get the idea. You can put a loader until you get the data. You have a hook that's even cleaner than before. It returns you not just the to-dos, but whether or not the to-do is loading. Great. Let me do a poll and then we'll proceed. I think there's one more optimization to make here. And then we're pretty close to the library that I was talking about, the use SWR library that I think Vercel only has created. Okay, great. 93%, 94%, 95%. Beautiful. All right. Last thing. Cleaning the data, loading parameter. This one's cool. Auto refreshing hooks. Don't look at the solution. What if you want to keep polling the backend every n seconds? What if I tell you, okay, bhai, this hook needs to, number one, take n as an input, which is the number of seconds after which you should re-poll the backend. What does re-poll the backend mean? Hit the backend again get back the fresh list of to-dos and set them in the state so that, if the backend has changed, if the person has a mobile app as well, and the person updated the list of to-dos on the mobile app, they should automatically appear here as well. So every n seconds, refresh the list of to-dos, where n comes as an input here. So whoever is calling use to-dos will give you n, let's say 5. Okay, by every 5 seconds, you should refresh. You should hit the backend again. Can you figure this out? I'll give you guys 30 seconds. I'm assuming if this much was straightforward, this is straightforward as well. This is the last thing I wanted to introduce in data fetching hooks. So try it out. The problem statement is, you can read it here basically. Auto refreshing hooks. What if you want to keep polling the backend every n seconds? This hook needs to write the logic to re-poll the backend, get fresh data from the backend again every n seconds, where n is being received as an input. If I send 5 here, then the to-dos need to refresh every 5 seconds and hit the back. By refresh, I mean it should hit the backend again, get back the data again, and then update this to-dos list if the backend has changed. Which in this case, if you remember, our backend returns us a fresh list every time. So you can assume the backend is changing very quickly. Someone is updating to-dos on the backend, but I have to refresh to see the new list of to-dos. How can I auto refresh? How can I every 5 seconds or whatever is the input the user is sending, every n seconds, hit the backend again? I see a few people have already solved it. Why do we need to refresh? Someone asked. As I said, if I have a to-do application, if you have Twitter, if you open Twitter here, if I go to home, after 2 minutes, it says 10 new tweets received. It says here ki 10 new, you click on it. You automatically refresh. Even if the person hasn't hard refreshed, you still fetch the fresh data from the backend. Similarly, if this was a real to-do application, I open it here on the web, I open it here on my mobile. If I update a to-do here, I should see that update reflected here. If not right now in like 10 seconds, right? That is why you automatically refresh backend. That is why you get the freshest data from the backend. Is this the only way to do it? No. WebSockets are the more popular way to do this, but let's not go there. Just assuming you only have HTTP calls, how would you update this hook so that it hits the backend every n seconds and gets the freshest data from the backend? That's the question. And a few people I see already have posted the answer, which basically was, in the use effect, create a set interval which runs every n into 100 seconds, n into 1000 seconds, basically these many milliseconds. Okay, by 5 is received as an input. Then every 5 seconds, run this code. And also run this code once. The thing about intervals is it will only kick in after 5 seconds. So the user will not see anything for 5 seconds. So you have to make sure you run it once at least. And then after every 5 seconds also, you rerun this logic so that your backend data keeps on getting refreshed. All right. Let's see how this works. This is not the perfect solution. There are a few things that are wrong in this, but this is a start. If I save this and if I refresh, I see 4 to-dos, and after 5 seconds, I see a new list. This is similar to when I'm on Facebook or LinkedIn. If I leave it idle for a while, it'll show me the new set of posts that came in. Even if I don't hard reload the page, it will poll the backend. It will ask the backend every few seconds, "Ke bhai, any new data? Any new data?" In this case, it's asking the backend every 5 seconds, any new to-dos, any new to-dos. And if the backend returns to-dos, you see them here. If the backend returns no to-dos, you see nothing. That's what's happening. This was the code that was expected to be written. This isn't perfect. There are problems here, but it works. Functionally, it looks okay. Are we good? Was this straightforward? Okay, beautiful. 91%. Great start. The problem in this code basically is, okay, if you're using n here, you should have it as a dependency. That's the first problem. And the second problem here is if you do use n as a dependency here, anytime n changes, this code will rerun, which means you will start another interval. That is not good. You don't want two intervals running, right? If for some reason throughout the life cycle of this app, this input changed from 5 to 10, firstly, this should rerun. If you don't have n as a dependency, then this will not rerun. This will still have the original n equal to 5 here. And so, number one, this is generally true. If you're using a state variable inside a use effect, that should be a dependency. Otherwise, whenever that dependency changes, this code doesn't rerun, which is something we want. If this state changes from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20, this code should rerun. We should start a new interval. But what is the problem? The problem is if this changes from 5 to 10, you had one interval running and you will start another interval. You need to clear the old interval. I repeat, if n changes, you need to make sure that I start a new interval for the new n, but I need to stop the interval for the old n. Otherwise, I will have two intervals running, and the backend will be two clocks are running. Basically, you're hitting the backend more often than needed. So how do you fix this? Can you guess now? I think we discussed this today. We need to create a cleanup function. Okay, bhai, anytime n changes, first this logic will run, which needs to clear the original clock. It needs to make sure that the clock that was running is stopped, and then the new clock starts. You don't want two clocks running, one for n equal to 5 and one for n equal to 10. If whoever was calling it has changed n, they want the previous clock to stop and the new clock to start. And hence, in this cleanup function, you need to stop the old clock. Here I will introduce the syntax to actually stop clocks. So if you don't understand it, this is not React related basically. This is generally if you start an interval, the way to stop that interval is you can get the value. This set interval returns you like a number. Whenever you call set interval, it returns you a number, which you can basically pass to clear interval. Just like set interval is a function, clear interval is another function where you can pass this value that was returned to you by this, and that will stop the clock. This is the right solution of this specific hook. You don't need all of these fancy things. If you know that this input won't change, or if you want to hard code this input here in use to dos, that's fine as well. But if you are expecting n as an input, and if you want if n changes from 5 to 10, then this effect works correctly. You need to add cleanup logic. You need to add n as a dependency here, else your effect won't run. You will see problems. If you change the input here from 5 to 10 to 15, if you don't have n as a dependency, this code won't rerun. This new n will not get updated. And if you add n as a dependency, even though the new clock starts, the old clock does not stop. So you need to add this cleanup logic to stop the old clock. This is the right solution for this problem. Again, you won't see it because I'm putting a constant here, it never changes. But if this was not a constant, if I told you that bhai, this needs to be a state variable in itself, if I told you that the application is कि यहाँ पे इसके ऊपर there needs to be an input box where you need to put this specific value that keeps on changing, then this would have been a problem and you would have basically needed this logic. Let me post this more elegant solution. Won't matter at all if this n is constant, but if it isn't constant, if this is a state variable in itself, then you need number one, the cleanup logic. Number two, add this as a dependency. Let me post all of this final solution on Notion as well, so you guys can see it. All right, you should see it here. The final solution. And that's it. That's all I had to cover for data fetching hooks. Simple solution. Just get the data. Slightly complicated solution. Return loading as well. Most complicated solution. Auto refreshing hooks. The ugly solution for it, which does not, clean up the interval. And then the cleaner final solution for it, which actually clears the interval. Last thing, all of this you did not have to write. There's a very popular library called SWR, which I think Vercel has created, which pretty much lets you do the same thing. They've basically defined hooks like these. So you can simply do const data, comma, is loading, comma, it also gives you another access to another thing called error, equal to use SWR and pass it the URL that you want to poll. And then it pretty much does the same thing. So you do not that was too fast. You did not have to write this custom hook. Use SWR is a famous, or SWR more specifically, is a famous library that lets you do the same thing, but it's good that you can write it yourself. All right. Time for a pause. I think it's been an hour. So mess break time for everyone. Let's meet back in 7 plus 5. That's 12 minutes. Let's meet back in 12 minutes. So feel free to take a breather. I'm going to do the same. Opening the poll. Was this clear? Okay, good, great. We'll love to see it. 92%. Going to open chat for, how much did I say? 10 minutes. So we'll start at 8:15. All right, opening chat. Lots of questions. Let's go from the top. Please bring old layout. Can you try unfull screening? I think that's trick. Is use query good? Yes. Why did you not return set to-dos from use to-dos custom hook? Because look at this library. Use SWR. This is what we were trying to create, right? It's a hook that a famous library has already created. Do they return you set data? They don't. Because whoever is using it does not need to worry about how are to-dos set. He's like, bhai, give me the set of to-dos. I'm fine. You take care of actually updating the to-dos. I don't need the value to actually update it. That is why I did not return it. Set timeout or set interval. If you want to keep hitting it every few seconds, then it's a set interval. That's what I've written here. If you have to only hit it once after 10 seconds, then you use a set timeout. So that's the difference. Pick and choose which you would want to use. In this case, you need an interval. Does any additional functionality add on if you start the name of the hook with use? Or is it just a naming convention and just a normal function? No, React will begin to complain if you use useState inside a function that's called hello world. React will throw an error. Okay, you cannot use a hook inside a non-hook function. So it's not just a convention. It will actually begin to error out if the hook does not start with use. How can we ensure the abstraction introduced by a custom hook doesn't compromise the code readability, especially in scenarios where multiple components rely on the same custom hook for different purposes? How can we ensure that the abstraction introduced doesn't compromise code readability? I mean, how would it compromise code readability? If anything, it makes it much more readable, right? In any case, if you're abstracting out code into a different place, it makes your code much more readable. So I can't think of any case where it, becomes less readable. Of course, you shouldn't overdo it. Don't do it if you clearly cannot see, this being used in 10 different places. But yeah, under hook, we fetch data twice. Why? We don't fetch it twice. We only fetch it once. And then this happens in an interval. So after 5 seconds, the first call here will happen. And then after 5 seconds, if that was your question, maybe your question was something else. SWR versus React query, which is better? When to use which? Yeah, that depends. Both of them serve the same purpose. Depends on what the project wants or what the project already had, or if the project has introduced it on their own. A lot of projects want to store their state in recoil, for which it does not make sense for you to use any of these hooks, because these you need to use if you don't want to use a state management library of your own. They sort of are doing state management for you. So it depends. Most projects that I've seen want to store their state in recoil or whatever Redux. So for that matter, they don't use any of these. But if you want to quickly get out the ground, you don't want a state management library, keep things simple, then you use SWR or React query, whichever you want. No preference at all. It's like, how do you decide between React or Vue or Angular? Or how do you decide between Redux and recoil? Whatever the maintainer wanted, whatever the maintainer is comfortable with, they just go with it. There's no big performance dip that you will see for most websites. But it's like changing in 1 second and not 5 seconds. But it's changing in 1 second, not 5 seconds. Should change in 5 seconds. Look at my screen. Loading 221. Let's wait for, how much is my n here? It's 10. So after 10 seconds, you will see this load. I don't understand import. Hey, look at this. Don't understand import. And I see a bunch of code. Can you post it on Discord? That's too much code for me to look at right now. For like sake of time, looking at all the doubts, I'm going to ignore that question. Can we create custom hooks in other files? Yes, you can just create them in other files, export them and import them. A lot of people are asking SWR also React queries. Is this like some sort of a controversy that happened? Either is fine, guys. I have never used either. I have heard of SWR very popularly, but haven't really used it. React query, I think we did use. Could be wrong either way. Well, I never have thought about which is better. Either is fine. Whatever gets you off the ground. Mess break. And how much is left to cover in today's class? 2 more things we have to cover. So 2 more slides to go. If this happened pretty quickly, so I'm hoping the next few parts are pretty quickly as well. When will TS start? It'll start tomorrow. It'll not start today. I don't think it'll start today. Why did you return set? Okay, answered that. But how could use effect get called if dependency doesn't change for component mounted? Oh, if you have an empty array, it means this will run at least once. I agree that no dependency has changed. There are no dependencies. Yes, but if it's an empty array, this code does run once. If you have a dependency, then it runs the first time as well, and anytime the dependency changes as well. So basically this code will at least run once, irrespective of what the dependencies are. If there are 0 dependencies or 1 dependencies or 2 dependencies, at least on mount this will run, and then anytime any one of these changes, this will run again. That's why it runs on mount. Please bring the old layout. We'll try. Although a lot of people I don't know. I'll try. We'll do a poll in Discord after this. You said that if in use effect hook, if dependency array is empty, then it will run just once when the component gets mounted. But while using set interval inside use effect, how does it get triggered again and again? Great question. This runs once. This code runs once. Set interval runs once. But if you start an interval, then this code will keep running again and again, right? If I copy this code and if I paste it in the console here, if I write set interval only once, okay, by after every 4 seconds, run this code console.log hi there. Then after every 4 seconds, this code will run, hi there will get printed. Use effect only ran once. This set interval call only happened once. But because the set interval call happened once, the code inside keeps on running again and again. Can we give time in dependency array for refreshing the hooks? Can we give time in dependency array for refreshing the hooks? Are you saying this? Okay, if n is given as an input, you put n here and that will rerun this logic again and again? Probably don't do that. You can do that. I get what you're saying. I guess you're saying, I will update this every 5 seconds and that will re-trigger this specific use effect. This is the cleaner way to do it. If that's the direction if you're thinking of going. It's probably not the way to do it. How to make a fully fledged course selling website, just like 100x steps in the end of the cohort. We can do it. I don't think that was part of the original plans. The original plan is like Paytm, Zerodha, and Zapier, but we'll see. I'm creating a Reddit-like app, and every time I visit a homepage, I should see 10 random posts which are of random users. Then how do I do it on the backend side? How to handle regex like this? Can you please suggest a resource where I should look? Some URL post 10. So usually what you're trying to do for something like Reddit, there is like some recommendation engine that finds, what are the top 10 posts currently viral or popular. But if you want random, then just, in your backend route, get 10 random most urgent or most recently posted, or put some sort of an algorithm, most recently posted plus have at least 10 upvotes and get those. So put some ad hoc logic on the backend. Is purely backend. On the backend, you have to make sure that this call gets you only 10 posts. What you need to worry about is pagination, which you can read about on any resource. You just search for how to add pagination to Node.js backend route, so that you can, only get 10. And then if the person goes to page 2, you get the next 10, so on and so forth. Can we have a Docker file to deploy React Node.js file? We can. You just put that, the same thing in ChatGPT will give you. Probably you don't want to host React on Docker. There's no point of doing a React, like hosting a React project inside Docker. Node, still there's some point, but probably separate your front end and back end and only Dockerize the backend. Why class-based components became obsolete? It's just ugly to write, dude. I mean, I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but high level, I personally hate it the way it used to be written, and much cleaner to use hooks is what I thought the reason was. Like, I very naturally saw it one day, and then since then only started to use functional components. I'm sure there was a better reason for doing it. Why component mounted is logged in red like that? Because I wrote console.error. I did not write console.log. I wrote console.error. That's why I got logged in red. That's all. Clear interval did not understand. I'll quickly take you through it because we're at time here. When I created a set interval, can you see it gave me 1 back? If I do ever set const x equal to set interval and log x, this will have some value in it, which as you can see is like an increasing number. This basically represents how can you find that clock. Okay, the second clock ka ID is 2. The first clock ka ID is 1. And if I call clear interval with 1, it stops the first clock. If I call it with 2, it stops the second clock. And as you can see now, no hiders are getting printed because I have cleared all the clocks. So that's how you sort of clear a running clock. You get back the ID of the clock when you start the interval, and then later call clear interval with that clock ID. Very big code, I'm going to ignore. Paris clock, please, motivation will set interval. If you make display none, it will not unmount. The component is still there. The thing is still rendered. It's just not visible. So it will still be mounted. All right, cool. Going to skip the rest of them, push them to the end. Let's move on. Let's understand some other type of hooks that I sort of created in my head, if I'm being honest. Do you need them? No. Can you work without them? Sure. But good to impress people. Generally good to know how you can create hooks like these on your own. And how they will make your code cleaner. Yada, yada. Okay? A lot of these are not things that you need to know. Data fetching hooks, I can still argue that there are libraries out there. But everything you see from here, you don't need to hookify generally, but you will see the benefits of creating hooks out of these. With that, let's get to the first one. Let's make this a little more interactive, and let's make you guys code. Create a hook called use is online. The hook is called use is online. It should return true if the user is currently online, which means their Wi-Fi is connected, and return false if it's not connected. What is a use case for this? A good use case for this is if you have a gaming website, where a person comes, and if their Wi-Fi turns off for some reason, you want to show them you are offline, bada bada. It should say you are offline. Whenever they connect back to the internet, it should say you are online. Very common use case you'll see. You can do this without hooks. I've written some hints as to how you actually do this even without React, but we have to hookify it. We have to convert it into a use is online hook. What I mean is, by the end of it, the code should look something like this. Let me clean this up. Const is online equal to use is online. And then here I should be like, if is online, then return you are online, yay. Else it should return you are offline, please connect to the internet. We have to write this specific hook, use is online hook, given you are already given some information, which is window.navigator.online returns true or false based on whether the user is online. So if I go to my console right now, and if I type window.navigator online, it's returning me true because I am currently online. If I turn my Wi-Fi off right now, which I won't, but if I do, then this will become false. That's one thing that's already given. The other thing that's given to you is you can attach the following event listeners to listen whether or not the user went offline or user went online. You can basically write this code that will create an event listener कि anytime the user goes online, this code will run. Anytime the user goes offline, this code will run. So if I copy this or both of these lines, open my console and paste them here. Now, if I turn off my Wi-Fi, it will print became offline. If I turn it back on after that, it will print became online. I have added to event listeners कि भाई whenever I go online, this should run. Whenever I go offline, this should run. Given you are given this information, try to figure out how can you create the use is online hook, right? I'm going to give you guys a minute and then I will write it myself. If you don't want to do this part, you can also just, create some sort of a timer that every 5 seconds checks if window.navigator.online, then return true or return false. If you don't want to go as fancy as this, so even this much is enough. But if you really want to go fancy, then use both of these. The solution is here, but don't look at it. Give a minute and then I will write it myself as well. You can turn off the Wi-Fi for your browser also through network tab. Oh, you can. Let's see. I knew you could decrease the speed. Oh, you can. Caching, network throttling, user agent. Yeah, I'm sure there is a way, but let me not experiment with it right now. Constructor in functional components, there is no concept of a construct. Components, functional components are functions. Functions don't have constructors, only classes do. Very important question for me. Can I build moat for my web app if I practice and just cohort content? Do I need to good at data? Not for a web app. You don't need to be good at DSA. Yesterday I was exploring Rocket Chat and solving issue number this thing, but couldn't even navigate to the file where to add this feature. Can you please show? I've covered what you're talking about for a different project in all the GSOC videos. So you can go here unless you already haven't, which is go to ad hoc section, go to GSOC, and here you will find in this video also, I scrambled to reach the file. This video also, yeah, but it's not for the project that you're looking at right now. All right, a minute has passed. So let me quickly write this. How many of you were able to write it yourself? Would love to know. वैसे were you able to write this yourself? Yes or no? Okay, the people who are saying no, did you even try? Let me do another one. Did you actually try doing it or were you just waiting for me? Did you try actually solving the problem? Yes or no? 50% no. So ठीक है, मतलब people who tried were able to do it and people who did not try did not. It works for me. Means like it's pretty simple. Let's define a function. Let's call it use is online. And this is supposed to return something that should change, true or false. So it should be a state variable. Const is online, set is online. What should be the default value? The default value should be window.navigator.online. This is the default value. When this hook got called for the first time, whenever this state value initialized, it should be whether or not the user is currently online. And inside a use effect, so that it only happens once, I will put some logic to window.add event listener online set is online true, and then again window.add event listener offline set is online false, and then return is online. That's it. That's what was expected as the solution. There might be a bug here. I don't know. Maybe these aren't correct. There's a typo here. Unsure. Let's see. Window.add event listener online. Looks right. All right. This was it. Now anyone can use this hook and render you are online, you are offline. Using this hook, people don't have to. You could do this without a hook. You could put all of this logic here, but that's the whole benefit of creating a custom hook. Other people can now use it. I can export this. I can put it in a different file. Someone asked this a while back. I can totally put this, ideally the way you want to structure this is create a hooks folder. Inside a hooks folder, create a file called use is online. And then export this hook from here. And then you can just import it here from /hook/ wherever. And as you can see, the code is much cleaner compared to writing all of that logic here. That's the benefit of breaking things down into hooks. Let's see if it works, even though I won't be able to test it completely because I don't want to go offline, but there's a bug somewhere. Use state is not defined. Use state, import, refresh. Use effect is not defined. Use effect, refresh, there you go. It says you are online, yay. And if I go here and turn my Wi-Fi off, pretty sure it will say you are not online. Someone said there's a way to simulate going offline. I'm not going to try that. But I'm sure there's a way to do it here. Yeah, but I think this is it. This was the solution. Okay. Was it simple? Seems like most people were able to do it. We good to go? Beautiful. Again, 92%. Use mouse pointer hook. This one's nice. If you want to create an application like this, where, as the mouse pointer moves, you see your mouse pointer is the X and Y location of that mouse pointer. Let me show that one more time. How would you create an application like this? Given, again, you're already been given this window.add event listener, mouse move triggers an event and you can get access to the current X and Y there. I'm hoping if you understood the first one, then this one's pretty straightforward. Let me just show you the solution here. The use mouse pointer hook initializes X and Y to zeros. And then inside an effect, I say anytime the mouse has moved, call this function where I set the position to e.clientX and e.clienty, which are, the actual values of where the mouse pointer is. And then again, to make sure we're doing the cleanup correctly, to make sure, okay, whenever this gets unmounted, the use mouse pointer goes away. This function gets unmounted, which means this hook gets unmounted. We do clean up this event so that, you don't have a lingering event for no reason at all. I also, in the return, actually remove the event listener. I should have done the same thing here as well, by the way. I didn't do it here. Maybe I did it here in the solution. I did not. Here also, I should return a function that actually clears these event listeners so that, you don't have lingering event listeners if the hook ever unmounts. And when will the hook unmount? If this component unmounts. All right, let's copy this, paste it, and when you refresh, you will see the mouse pointer is, if I go to the top left, it says almost 0, 0. If I go to the bottom right, it says, whatever, 1080 cross 720. And you can keep playing with it. What was the code? Everything was encapsulated again in a single use mouse pointer hook, which gives you back the X and Y. Okay, this is the logic that you have to write. Again, I'm sure you can find libraries that let you do the same thing. Another very popular hook like this to create, which I should have added, is the current width and the current height. You want to take this as an exercise. Okay, current width and current height equal to use dimensions. Create a hook called use dimensions that gives you the current width and the current height as you resize the window. Also pretty popular use case to sort of build. All right, cool. So this seems straightforward. Let me do a poll, but I'm assuming this was simple. Let's move on to the next section after this, and then I'll take questions. Seems like we're on time today. Beautiful. So let's move on to the next section. I'm unsure if I'm teaching better today, if things are easy today, or if there are slides present so you're just looking at solutions. Either way, this is great. Let's do a feedback session at the end though. Performance/timer based. This is something extra I've introduced. Again, not sure if they're probably there, but good to know. Create a use interval hook. This one's slightly different from all the things we've done until now. That looks something like this. I can use the use interval hook and say, "Bhai, run this logic every 1 second." Try it yourself. This one's a little difficult, if I'm being honest. So if everything was pretty simple until now, try this one out. Create a use interval hook that you can use like this. What will this do? Every 1 second, increase the count by 1. The final app should look something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just keep going up. All right. I think there's a solution somewhere. There is a solution, but don't look at it. Try to implement it yourself. Going to give you guys 2 minutes and then I'll do it on my side as well, looking at Q&A until then. Online versus offline, well, this was easy. Oh, interesting. Seems like you guys have already, you explain window.add event listener one more time. Yes, this isn't something React specific. You can always attach event listeners to events thanks to just the browser. Okay, the browser will call a specific thing. Hi, there is still logging. Let me refresh. Okay, when I do window.add event listener online, function, whenever I write this code and paste it here in this console or somewhere else, anytime I connect to the Wi-Fi now, this will get locked. The control will reach here and this specific code will run. That is what add event listeners let you do. It lets you attach events or listen on events. The event that I'm listening on is online. Are there other events that I can listen on, Akirat? Yes, there is a whole list of events that you can listen on in the browser. Online is just one of them. Offline was another one. I'm sure you can find 100 different events that you can listen on, which will do what? Anytime that event happens, control will reach here. All right. Why are we using use effect? Where? Unmounted and mounted. Let me explain after I finish this really quickly, because let's let people leave who want to, who understand everything. So happy to take questions after this, guys. All right, we're at time. So let me copy over this code and paste it here in app.jsx. What do I have to do? Okay, bhai, I have to create a new hook called use interval that will take a function as an input and a timeout as an input. Okay, bhai, every n milliseconds run this function. And what can I do? I can be like, bhaiya, use effect, set interval, every timeout seconds run fn. That's it. The only thing that's missing here is timeout should be a dependency, function should be a dependency, you should do cleanups, all that jazz. But I'm not doing that. I'm hoping you guys are smart enough to do it now. This should ideally clean up. The set interval should clean up anytime timeout changes. You should do a clear interval here. Not going to do it. But all right, that looks right to me. Yeah, as you can see, it returns nothing because I'm not using any value here. I'm not doing const a equal to use interval. So it doesn't need to return anything. It just needs to take these two things as an input and start a clock for it that keeps on running until the component unmounts. So you should 100% clear interval here. I'm not doing it, but you should do it. All right, save. Most probably this will work. If it doesn't work, there's something obvious I'm missing. It does work. Timer. So 1, 2, 3. I'm assuming you guys were able to figure it out. Simple stuff. Let's look at the last one. I think the last one was difficult. Yeah. Use debounce. Create this one if you think all of this was simple. It's clear you need to first understand debounce, which a lot of people weren't able to understand the first time. And only then you can create use debounce. So let's spend some time here. How many of you, firstly, are we clear until this point? Can I proceed to use debounce? Was the last one clear? I'm assuming it was. Oh, last one isn't clear. All right, cool. 80%. So 80% jinka ho gaya hai, try to look at this and solve it. This one's going to be difficult. You need to first understand debouncing, which we covered once, but I'm unsure how many people were able to understand it. For the people who weren't able to understand this one, let me explain it one more time. What do we have to do? We have to create a hook called use interval that takes two inputs, a function and a timeout. And this function hook needs to run this function every n seconds. So I can either do this. Okay, haan bhai, this function will get called here. So I can simply start a timeout and keep running this function every n seconds. You can also do this if you want, if this seems cleaner. Fn comma timeout. This works as well. But what is the problem of doing it this way? The problem is app can re-render. Anytime app re-renders, this function will run again. And if this function runs again, set interval will start another clock. And this is why you have to guard this inside a use effect. Okay, bhai, irrespective of how many times use interval gets called, only the first time start the interval. Other than that, no need to start the interval. That's the ugly solution. The cleaner solution is you doing this const interval equal to this, and then, returning clear interval, so that whenever this unmounts, whenever app unmounts and this goes away, then the interval gets cleared and you're not, still increasing the value of, calling the function again and again. You don't have to keep calling this if use interval unmounts, but let's not go there. Let's keep things a little simple. Is this one clear? How can I create use interval that calls set interval on this function so that after n seconds this runs? Let's do a poll. Okay, beautiful. Now let's get to the last one. Use debounce. इसके लिए you first need to know debounce. जिनको debounce नहीं पता, the people who don't know debounce until this point, this will be really hard. But let me start with a problem statement maybe. Let's say, if you remember the Paytm project, this is what it looked like in the end. Let me show you. To explain this a little better, let's go to the Paytm project and let's look at one of the pages in the Paytm project. This page right here. There is an input bar here where I can type, okay, I want to search for Harkirat or some other name, and I am a very fast typer. You will see this in other websites as well. If I go to amazon.in and if I start typing, I can type really fast. So anytime I'm typing AirPods Max, let's say, there is a backend request that's going out, searching the database and returning me this person. These are the suggestions for you based on the input query. If I type A, there is a query that goes out to the backend. If I type AI, there is another query that goes back and finds all the suggestions that start with AI. Same R, P, O. There are multiple backend requests that are going out. What if I type really fast? If I type AirPods, then should a request for A also go out, AI also go out, AIR also go out, or should a single request go out for AirPods? Ideally, a single request should go out. You want to minimize the load on your backend. You want to minimize the number of requests that are going out. And for that reason, you should debounce this backend call. You should not send it unless no activity has happened for, let's say, 200 milliseconds. I repeat, you should not send this backend request unless no key has been pressed for 200 milliseconds. So 200 milliseconds after the last key was pressed is when you should send out a call. If there is another key that got pressed in less than 200 milliseconds, you wait for 200 more milliseconds until you finally fire off the request. This is what is called debouncing, deferring the request, the expensive operation. Okay, by wait, don't send out the value just yet. Wait for 200 more milliseconds. Maybe he wants to type something more. Let him type a little bit more. And then eventually, as 200 milliseconds have passed, he hasn't typed anything. Chalo, let's send out the backend request. This is what is debouncing. Do we understand debouncing first? Great. If we understand debouncing, let's look at the hook. The hook says, okay, you have an input value which will update very quickly. It will update anytime the input changes. So if you have an input box that updates input value anytime the user types in, this changes very quickly. You have to get debounced value equal to use debounce input value comma 500, which means this will only change when you are ready to fire off the request. Debounced value should first get A, then it should get AirPods. It should not get AI and then AIR and then AIRP. This should get either A first, yeah, nothing first, and then Sida get AirPods. This should not get the intermediate values that you know you don't want to send the backend request for. That is what use debounce needs to do. It needs to debounce storing this value in here until you're ready to fire off a request, so that you can just add a use effect here with debounce value as a dependency. You can be like, yahan pe I will put a use effect. Debounce value will be dependency. I know debounce value is debounced. I know it does not contain any intermediate values. It only contains the final value. It only contains the value ki 500 milliseconds have passed and user hasn't changed input value. So I can use this to fire off the backend request. How do you create the use debounce hook? That is the question. Do we understand the question? Try to write it yourself if you do. We have written this once, and this is the part where you chew some glass and try to write it yourself. Chalo, we understand the problem sort of. Let's implement the solution and then happy to rediscuss the problem as well. Let's try to create the use debounce hook, which again, there is a solution here, but I would urge you to not look at it. I might have to look at it if I'm being honest. I don't know if I can implement this live, but again, would urge you to do it. Actually, let me just look at Q&A now. Try to do this yourself. I'm happy to explain it again after in like 11 minutes, but let me take a few questions for the next 11 minutes because this is not too difficult. As you can see, it's like 10 lines of code. So try to write it yourself. I think if you write it yourself, you'll learn a lot. And until then, let me open chat and answer a few questions. Let's do one set of questions. And if you understand it, drop off, guys. No need to stay back. Going to answer a few questions. Chat is open. All right. Starting from the bottom. Unfortunately, I'm not doing events anymore. I'm not in India for a while, so won't be able to do any events. I saw Palacia does video. What is Palisa? And I tried to do it with Rocket Chat. What am I missing? I saw Palisa does video. So I tried to do it with Rocket Chat. What am I missing? I do not understand the question. It sounds like an interesting question though. Ask it again when I open chat. Though MongoDB is not used in the industry standard, is it important to learn MongoDB completely or some use case? Yeah, not really. No one I'm seeing is using it. Anyways, people have abstractions like Prisma on top, so it does not matter what the database is these days. It's just all abstracted out. Is Next.js an extension of React.js, or is it a whole different syntax to learn? It is, you can call it an extension. If I'm being honest, the teams have also completely sort of merged now, very closely becoming the same project only. If you know React, you can learn Next very easily. You just need to understand some concepts well, specifically server-side rendering, static site generation. If you understand these, then you understand high level. Achha, theek hai. This is how I can convert my React project to a Next project. Hierarchyat, I'm a job and lagging very behind in this course. I've only finished JavaScript so far. So can I manage 2-3 hours daily? Yeah, just start from the top and do the assignments even if you don't understand videos. Like make sure you're able to understand the assignments and do them diligently. All right. Memoization using use memo versus use effect in depth. Use effect runs after the component is rendered. Let me post this so other people can look at it. I'm not going to read through this. Seems like it's a nice thing to look at though. Let's see. I'm going to paste this at the end so other people can read through it if need be. Let's see. When there is a change in to-dos in use to-dos after use effect, app component will also re-render. How? When there is a change in to-dos in use to-dos after use effect, app component will also re-render. Yes, it will. Anytime a state variable changes, anytime a hook refreshes, the component will re-render. Whatever component is using that hook that is returning a new value now, it will re-render. And how can you confirm it? You can confirm it by putting a log. So if I use the use debounce hook here, it returns me, let's say, whatever value. whenever this value changes, this thing will re-render. You can confirm it by putting a log here. A re-render is basically nothing but, the function getting called again. Yeah. How do I handle side effects in a custom hook? You can do whatever you want, right? You can add whatever side effect you want here. Put a use effect here that lets you do whatever you want to do. Like hit a backend, add a timer, clock, interval, all that jazz. Network chance stable, no throttling to offline. Got it. That makes sense. I saw. Okay, so that. How does memory leak happen inside React.js? I have no idea. Like no idea from the top of my head. There's probably a way to trigger some sort of memory leak that I have no idea about. I can Google it and find out if need be, but no idea on the top of my head. What databases and cloud platforms you used for currently storing videos and PDF Linux websites? It is stored in S3, distributed via CloudFront. I've got a freelance project where I need to store videos and PDFs. I was wondering what to do. So there is an easy way to do it, which is use something like Cloudinary, and then there's a hard way to do it, which is S3, some object store, and then CloudFront on top, some CDN on top. CloudFront plus S3 is usually the way to go. Is use interval a hook because it does not return a state? It's still a hook. Even if it doesn't return a state, it's letting you do something, right? Some sort of use interval uses another hook inside, so it is a hook. Even if it doesn't return a value, does use effect return a value? No, still it is a hook, right? Similarly, use interval is a hook even though it doesn't return you a value. Getting fast as time passed by. I think today's class was pretty manageable. I saw 90% throughout, which is usually pretty good. Please explain use interval. Let's see. Forget the code. Do you understand what needs to be done? Just like use effect needs to run this code anytime a dependency changes, use interval needs to run this code after these many seconds. That is what use interval is supposed to do. How do you do it? How can you, given this function will get called anytime app renders, so the control will reach here. How can you start a clock the first time it gets called? You can be like, I'll put this inside a use effect. The first time this gets called, I will start a clock that will run this function every n seconds. That is how use interval does what it's supposed to do right now. Okay, bhai, call this function that you're receiving as an input every n seconds. So you could totally do this. You could totally do this as well, right? You can be like, set interval, call something after 1,000 seconds. But you cannot do it. You have to put it inside a use effect so that across re-renders, this control does not reach here and a new clock does not start. Rather than doing it like this, I just put it inside a separate hook. That's how use interval works. All right, not a lot of questions. Let's finish use debounce, guys. I don't know how many of you were able to do it, but let me copy it and explain. I can do it myself also, but let me not waste everyone's time here. I'm happy to do it either way, if I'm being honest. What suits you guys better? Should I implement this myself? Yes or no? Should I implement this myself? 50, 50, 70. Okay, let me write it myself. So you see me struggle as well a bit. Okay. What does this need to do? Given an input, type equal to text, on change equal to set value, e.target.value. You have this input. Let me just log the debounced value here as well. Debounced value is debounced value. All right. So this is what the code looks like right now. And let's say use debounce. For now, even though it takes two inputs, value and timeout, for now it just returns the value. Okay. I have not done anything in use debounce yet. It gets a value as an input, returns it as such. Doesn't even need to be a hook, can be a simple function as well. Let's see if this works as expected. If I open this website, I have an input box, and if I type something inside, it says debounced value is whatever value I have here. I see it here. Ideally, this value should debounce. It should slowly update. If I stop typing for 5 seconds or 500 milliseconds is when the value should update. That is not happening right now because this is simply returning the value. What should this do? This should be like, okay, bhai, anytime value changed. So use effect, anytime value changed, start a clock for 500 milliseconds. So set timeout, start a clock for 500 milliseconds. That will actually update the value. Const debounced value, set debounced value equal to use state. Initial value will be the value that you get as an input. And anytime the value changes, set debounced value only after 500 milliseconds of that happening. This is a good mid checkpoint. Okay, now at least I know, okay, bhai, if I start typing, immediately the value won't change. It will change after 500 milliseconds. Let's see if this works or not. If I go here, oh, some error came. Oh, what's the error? Oh, this should have been an array. I gave it a value. That was the error. Refresh. If I type, the function is delayed. If I type something removed, after 500 milliseconds, the value went away. If I type, it's like sort of, after 500 milliseconds, everything is slowly catching up. What is the one thing I'm missing? Okay, bhai, if amongst 500 milliseconds, before 500 milliseconds, this gets called again, then you should clear the old clock. I want, okay, bhai, if I type a lot quickly, after the last keystroke, uske 500 milliseconds baad, this should update. It should not keep updating for all the keystrokes. So what can I do? Anytime the value has updated, let timeout number or whatever you want to call it equal to set timeout. Anytime this value updates, this function will get called, the function that I'm returning, where I can be like clear timeout. Clear the old clock. If this gets called very quickly, first clear the old clock that was setting the value to, some intermediate value, and then run this code to start a new clock. Keep starting new clocks, keep stopping old clocks until you reach the point, okay, this does not get called for 500 milliseconds, and then the actual value gets updated. Now, if I save this, this is probably the solution. Now, if I go here, let's say this was Amazon.com, I'm typing AirPods Max, 500 milliseconds, then AirPods Max came here. Now I can send the backend request with AirPods Max. I don't have to send one request for A, one for AI, one for AIR, so on and so forth. If I type, keep typing, hands off, and after 500 milliseconds, the request can go out. Right now, the request isn't going out, but it's as simple as doing this. Okay, you have the debounced value, and put a use effect. Okay, by anytime debounced value changes, then do a Axios or do a fetch to send the backend request to actually get data from the backend for this specific debounced value. Hopefully that was clear. Pretty straightforward. How are we doing? Do we understand this part? I'm assuming ye part might be a little unclear, but happy to re-explain it, or it might be clear as well. Let's do a poll so you can see where you stand in the class as well. How many of the people were able to understand this. This one is a little difficult, I'm not going to lie, but everything else was pretty straightforward. Okay, 77. It's pretty good. So let me explain this one more time and then happy to take questions. What is the problem statement? Problem statement is this will get called many times with a quickly updating value, which basically means control will reach here very, very quickly. As I type, control will reach here for each and every keystroke. Okay, value got changed to A, then it got changed to AI, then it got changed to AIR, then it got changed to AIRP, so on and so forth. What do you have to do? You have to be like, bhai, this is what I'm returning. I need to update this thoda cautiously. I don't need to update this for every update. I need to start a clock. Okay, bhai, I will update you after 500 milliseconds or whatever the input timeout is. I will start the clock. But if another update rolls in first 500 milliseconds, I will clear the old clock and start a new clock. I will clear the old clock, start a new clock. That way, I keep clearing clocks. I only have one active clock at the time, which is the last value plus 500 milliseconds. If Harkiyat types a lot here, AirPods Max, even though Harkiyat is typing and not stopping, even though control reaches here again and again, the clear timeout also happens again and again. Only the last clock is valid. Only the clock for the last thing that Harkiyat has put here remains active. All the other clocks keep on getting cleared. And that is how the last one actually is able to update the debounced value, which is what gets returned here. And that is how this thing is debounced. This value, even though value changes very quickly, this only changes after some certain point. And if you're using this in the use effect below, you can ensure that you're not sending too many backend requests. You're only sending requests that are, debounced, that don't send one for A, one for AIR, one for ARP. They only send one request for AirPods Max. Let's search the database for AirPods Max. Cool. That's what use debounce is. I feel like I explained the same thing again. So I'm unsure if it made it any clear. Let me do another poll. And then I'm going to look at more actionable questions. Class is done, guys. That's all for today. Tomorrow we will start TypeScript. Okay, great. Cool. This seemed like a more chill class. I don't know if the things were easy, they were explained better, or if the slides helped. But either way, opening chat now. Again, feel free to drop off. Nothing extra to learn today. And thank you for joining. I will see you guys tomorrow where we start TypeScript. Let me open chat. All right. Slides helped. Great. Can you explain use deferred value hook as a React doc recommend for better performance? Use deferred value. Let's see. Instead of custom debounce, let's see. It's you. Defer the update part of the UI. Yeah, this seems like it does the same thing. The return deferred value is the same as the value provided. During updates, I will first attempt to re-render the old value. So if it will return the value. This seems like something else. The values you pass user should be either primitive values or what does use deferred value actually do? Call user the top level of the component to get a deferred version of that value. During the initial render, the deferred value will be the same as the value you provided. During the update, value will lag behind the latest value. In particular, React will first re-render without updating the deferred value and then try to re-render the newly received value. This seems like this is not what use debounce is. It seems like a thing to prevent use deferred value. If you know something is changing this is going to cause an expensive operation, you defer the rendering of this until later. I don't think this is the same as debouncing. I'm happy to try it out locally as well. If you want to upgrade the cohort, just ping rookie email. It'll eventually happen. 1 to 100 starts in a long time. You'll get upgraded. Don't worry about it. I saw Rocket Chat. Yesterday I was exploring Rocket Chat and thought of solving issue this, but could not even navigate the file version. What am I missing? Okay, let's look at your issue. Rocket Chat. This is your issue. Direct access to user's profile via image and name. Currently in Rocket Chat, the user needs to click on the user. Oh my god. Please assign this to me. Could it be more, I will have to look at the project completely to do it. But if I were to, reach this point so I can make this code change, number one, I would search for user info. this actually might not be part of this project. Rocket Chat actually, I think, has a React library. Rocket Chat, React Native. It might be this. I could be wrong. Maybe it isn't this. But I think they have a separate React port of, this probably is it. So what was it again? User info. This probably has a app bar component, nav bar component, which has user info. I mean, this is how I would, begin to reach the point where the file is. I, of course, cannot solve the exact issue. I can also, if you want me to, like, it would take me like a few hours. But this is how I would start to reach that point. Almost same answer for debounce question, just forgot to use debounce state. Makes sense. How to update the data, for example, set to dos using custom hooks. How to update data using custom hooks. I mean, if you really want to do it, then you can do this. Okay, use to dos returns both, to dos and set to dos. You can do this. You can have a custom to dos. This will still send out the first request, and then eventually, if you want to update, this does return you set to do. So you can do this if you want to do that. Should we download TS already? What do you mean download TS already? Can you explain debounce? Answer that. Will this work? Someone pasted something. Let's see. Copy. This function use debounce. Const pichla equal to null. Oh. Null. Clear timeout. This will work as well. What you've written will work as well. This is fine as well. Yeah, this is fine. Clear timeout pichla. Yeah, this works. Where are you right now? Can you not see? I'm in Golden Gate Bridge. No, this is it's not Golden Gate Bridge. This is Paris. Just my room is very clunky, so I've put a virtual background. I want to upgrade. Answer that. I thought we'll register it to keypress events. What does that mean, Ankur? Go to the time behind writing code, and now you write code behind. We can copy paste code. Understand that? Great. How to get comfortable with complex code? Takes time. Break it down into smaller codes. Hey, can you please tell us the Axios frontend get post request in detail? There is a video that covers this well that I was posted yesterday. It's 8.3 that covers the difference between Axios and Fetch. So you can go to week 8. This is the video. Just go through it. It covers this in like half an hour. All right. Nginx when? Probably soon enough. I don't know. I'm not very sure of the timeline of the cohort now, if I'm being honest, because people want to slow down. We'll see. A lot of people said, let's not slow down. Let's complete everything in offline. So we will see. I mean, we're not too far off, if I'm being honest. So we will reach Nginx sooner than later. Difference between hook and a normal function React, apart from it starts with use. Well, a hook uses another hook. A function can never use another hook. You can never write, function sum, which does const x equal to use state. A function that is not a hook cannot use a hook. That's the big difference. If you ever want to use a hook, this needs to be a hook. Creating a subscription-based application, whenever user subscribes to a plan, then the user type changes to admin. So what should be the flow in that? High level thing is how to implement role-based authorization. Then do again need to create a token for that? No. For that, your user schema will look, your database will look something like this. Your user name, password, first name, last name is admin. Creating an application where whenever you subscribe to plan, the user type changes to admin. So yeah, you can just, is admin, you can set it to true whenever the user has bought their plan, or, is premium, set this to true or false, or, level, set this to 0, 1, 2, 3 based on how much money they have paid. This is the ugly way to do it. You ideally want to have, a separate table called subscriptions, where you have user ID has subscribed to, plan ID, and then another database called, another table called plans, which has, the various plans you have. Okay, simple for rupees 50, and then advanced for rupees 5,000, so on and so forth. And then subscriptions table contains this user ID has subscribed to this plan, this user ID has this plan. That way, go from there. Depends on how much you want to complicate the schema. Simplest solution is this. Okay, along with first name, last name, everything, you store a level. Okay, this user has paid, so they're at level 1. They have paid 100,000 rupees, so they're at level 2, so on and so forth. I want to upgrade my, okay, answer that. Okay, did I miss a question? Will this work? That will work. The Pichla wala solution is nice. Pace is fast. Is it really still fast? It's like 92% of the people were able to do it. And is this slow? Will be a little too slow if I'm being honest. But I'll do a poll after this, so don't worry about it. Is there a change in state variable in child component, parent will re-render? If there is a state change in the child component, parent will not re-render. Vice versa is true. If the parent renders, child will re-render. If a child renders, parent will not re-render. How to update the data, for example, set, okay, answer that. If companies don't use hooks, then why are we learning custom hooks instead of getting perfect in recall and redux? Good question. Biggest reason I can give you is this was officially part of the syllabus, so I can't really skip something that was initially promised. That said, it's not like it's not used. You will, for cases like these, need it. It's not, you will not spend 95% of the time here. Basically 5% of the times you might need to create a custom hook of your own. That's it. The steps you created in Paytm helped a lot. Can we get more such projects? I feel they're better than assignments and also won't require videos solutions as well. You say that, but then why was everyone pinging me on Discord? Okay, when are we getting solution? I had to create that tomorrow, last night at 2 a.m. Paris time. I think we'll have to either way create solutions, but it is fine. It's much more structured for me as well to have, a simple doc. That's why even today's thing I put on Notion. We'll do a poll and understand, but frankly, I think even for people, it's good to have it all in a single place. And rather than me sharing gists all around, it's easy for me to just put it in a Notion doc and you guys can look at it. So yeah, I like it. I don't hate this whole approach of slides. Can you write a custom React hook that returns previously entered value? Previously entered value. What does that mean? Previously entered value, as in it returns the last value that was put there. So this use prev, something like that. Use prev returns you the last value that was put there. Yeah, I think I understand what you mean. I could be wrong. Basically something like this. Use effect value const last value. Last to last value. I think this is what you mean. Anytime value changes, you set last to last value as last value, and then anytime this will not exactly work if I'm being honest. You will have to pass this dependency, but some variation of this is probably what you need. From what I could understand, what you want is, this hook returns if you give 1 as an input and then 2 as an input, this should return 1. And then if you get 3 as an input, this should return 2. And if you get 4 as an input, this should return 3. It should return one value, the previous value basically. Is that what you wanted? That's what you wanted. This is sort of the direction which you want to build it. This will not exactly work, but like very close to this will work. Can you please do the friend? Okay, answer that. Awesome. Yunus, that is awesome. That is how you create the Paytm application. Perfect. I have joined the course yesterday. I'm already good in Python full stack and I've been working as a Python developer for 6 months. I felt that there is no learning in that org. Quitted and I started learning JavaScript in depth where I'm lagging behind. My only question is DSA necessary to land decently paying job? Depends on the kind of company you're targeting. If you're targeting a FANG, yes. If not, then you'll be fine. Startups, you'll mostly be fine. React query came across one major difference between class-based components and functional components. The class-based components mutates the state of the component directly, whereas functional components creates a fresh component every time the state changes and can be verified using set interval, increases the count of the state. One major difference between, okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Let me guess. We can use state and use effect inside of a function and hence hooks were introduced. We can't use state and use effect inside of a function and hence hooks were introduced. You can use state and use effect inside of a function. Only that function is a component, but even components are functions, right? And so are hooks. So both of these are functions. You can use state and use effect inside them. You're just encapsulating it out. You can always do something without custom hooks. It's just a way to encapsulate things. Okay, how can we create React for doing any project? Why can't we create our React for doing any project? How? You taught us to create our own React. Why can't you use, oh, you're saying why can't you use custom hooks or like hooks that other people provide? You can use them. You can always find all of these hooks that we've created today just to learn how to do this yourself. All right. Similar questions. Alrighty. I think that's all same set of questions again. Let's do one more round and then we'll call it. Any more questions, guys? Might have missed a few questions, so feel free to ask again. All right. Is WebSocket included in our syllabus? In 1 to 100, yes. When should we use use state manager like Recoil instead of relying on contents like use reducer? Explain with reference would help. Thank you. When should you use state management library? Okay, so question is, when should you use something like Recoil rather than relying on either context or using use reducer? Good question. If your application is going to become really big, then you should use a state management library. If your application is big, but you want to do state management across 2-3 components, you don't want your state to go beyond, 10 components or is something, for example, if you have a state for just the nav bar, which you will, a few projects have this, the nav bar is very complex. If you hover over it, this opens up a few things, and you hover over this opens up a few things. There I have seen you use context rather than, storing all of this in state. State means you should store things like, videos, all the videos you have, titles, sidebar, whatever dynamic things are there. But, things that this component might need to send something to this join Discord button, which might need to send something to a pop-up that shows below. For them, you can use context. You probably don't want to create global state for things like these. So that's how you can decide. Basically, the moat of your application, which let's say for LinkedIn is all their posts or their messages, or for Instagram is, all the image posts. Those should probably be in state. Everything else should be, what do you call it? In the context API. Room tour, not right now. Room is a little too ugly. Harkirat, I am 31 years old, switching from 180 to IT. Out of completing the course, what can I do to start applying? Can I start applying with the knowledge we have got so far? Probably not so far. Wait for until we complete next. Till we complete TypeScript. Those are like bare minimum things that someone would expect from a senior engineer. And then after that, you're good to start applying. You should, you understand, you're starting at the same level as everyone else. So you should start with junior engineer roles initially. But yeah, that's how I would start. For delaying the search API, I thought we will register a custom hook that on the key press. We will register the custom hook to some key press events. And if on key up happens, we fetch. For delaying the search API, I thought we will register the custom hook to some key press event. You don't do that usually. If you're saying something like this, you probably will never do a window.on key down equal to some custom, use X. So you will never see this. You will only see hooks at the top of your components. So what you're saying might not work if I understand it correctly, and if this is what you mean. Someone from the cohort built this. It's going to pre-launch by first week. Open source it, but no idea how. Elevate your journey with mentorship. Looks pretty good. UI looks pretty good. Would love to talk to them. Let's see. Seems like it's open source. Empower your career with specialized skill branding mentorship. Connect industry experts. This sounds like an open source version of what do you call that? What's that company called in India that Nishant Chahar promotes a lot? I totally forgot. Like skill something, mentor buddy. ऐसे कुछ थी. हाँ सही है. Good. But like I don't know if open source is a moat here. Basically, open source is a moat in very technical businesses. So yeah, but we'll see. Good either way. Works for me. Love it. Can someone give example of custom hooks using use memo? Can you give some example of custom hooks using use memo? Use memo. Let me think of a use case, a good use case. Use memo. Can't think of one. Use memo. The use memo does not give you any functionality, right? It gives you performance benefits, which is why I can't think of, a use case where you can use it. You can totally, any place you have used use memo. If you encapsulate it inside a hook, you can use it, but I can't find a good example for you right now. What is the use case of defining backend separately when you can do everything in front end? You can't really do everything in front end. Open source daily code Vercel code, that I can do. Daily code web Vercel I can open source. Yeah, but yeah, there's nothing that was actually built during a live stream on YouTube. Most of the code that's written there. So yeah, happy to do it. What's the thing called? What is the use of defining the backend separately? I don't understand this question. What is the use of defining the backend separately? Don't understand the question well. This is the link where I read about use deferred value. How is deferring value different from rebouncing and throttling? Exactly what we needed. There are two common optimization techniques you might have heard of: rebouncing and throttling. While these techniques help in some cases, use of value is better suited to optimize rendering because it deeply user device. Unlike it does not require choosing any fixed delay. If the user's device is fast, the deferred value will render almost immediately. Wouldn't be noticeable. If the user is slow, it will lag behind. That makes a lot of sense. This is like, you don't have to do, give a timeout based on some random number in your head, 500 milliseconds. If the user's machine is fine, the timeout will be small, it will be faster. I think this works for front end if you want to avoid re-rendering a lot. I don't think this will work for, you want to minimize the number of backend calls. Could be wrong, but that's what I understand from it. Okay, for front end re-rendering, it's great. It will only re-render some parts if they have changed. But the backend calls it will probably still keep on doing so. So yeah. Did you get mugged in Paris? Not yet, sir. But wouldn't be surprised. People are very polite here, but people have told me to be, at least closer to Eiffel Tower, be a little safe. You'll find a lot of, never mind, a lot of foreign people there. For delaying, okay, answer that. If you use custom hook like used to do, which uses use SWR to fetch the true data multiple child components, will it call API once and use the cache value or make new API calls for every use? If you create a custom hook like used to do, which uses use SWR, if it uses use SWR, then I am not sure based on whether or not use SWR optimizes this. Most probably it won't. Most probably it will send out another request basically. But if you do it yourself, if you use Axios and you create your own use to do hook, then it will definitely, send out requests multiple times. Can you make this better? How can you make this better? You can make this better somehow. Make sure, I'm sure there's a way to memoize the value somehow. Okay, so that if two different places call the same use SWR hook or use to do hook, you only make the Axios request once. Or the other way to do this might be to put it in state somehow. Yeah, that's the answer to your question. While using set interval to fetch data every 10 seconds, the set interval functions will wait in the callback queue until the main stack is empty. So there's a long running task in the main stack, correct? The set interval callback might get delayed. Can you explain this and suggest a solution? Yes, this will happen. Most likely it won't happen. It's not like your idle is your thread is never idle for 10 seconds. So if you have a set interval that runs, every 10 seconds, 99% this will run at the 10.1th second at max. Usse zyada late nahi hoga. It won't delay more than that. The thread will become free at least once in 100 milliseconds. But let's say that doesn't happen as well. So what you can do is you can put this inside a set timeout. Okay, bhai, this will run after 10 seconds. And then this function you can be like, whenever this succeeds is when you will again call main after 10 seconds. Basically, rather than having an interval, you have set timeouts which only trigger the next timeout after the main function actually runs, after the backend actually returns you some data. That way you already know, okay, after I get data, uske 10 seconds baad I start the next main function call. Then after I get the data, which could take 1 second, could take 10 seconds based on how the thread is idle or not, the backend is responding or not. So just use a lot of set timeouts, like recursive set timeouts, rather than using a set interval to solve the specific problem that you're thinking will happen. Won't happen. Set intervals, your thread will be free at least some point. Is WebSocket? I answered that. Here I've cleared 2 interview rounds for a front end. Now the final round is a spot round and discussion about the approach. I have no idea how to prepare and what will be asked in this round. Can you give me some tips on the matter? And the spot round is basically, they will ask you, why did you solve this a certain way? You cannot prepare for it, and don't even. Be very honest and cool. This is a remote company, people are very chill, bro. If they've gotten you into this round, they're like, but they just want to make sure not, teachy, kitabi, padha hua person, and you're not giving standard Google answers. So be very chill. Explain your approach, why ever you took that specific approach, and you'll be fine. Don't prepare for it. You don't prepare for a round like this. Um, when using a library for the first time, how do you start with it? Recently, I was looking at draft.js and halat kharab ho gayi. Your libraries are meant to be very, very, simple. What is draft.js? Okay, it lets you do this. This should be pretty simple. Let's see. Let me use draft.js for you. Let's see how long it takes for me to add it to my project. Unless this is a very weird library that is not very React compatible, was eventually made React compatible. It seems like it is. It has like a Babel. So this is not on you. This might not be on you. Oh god. This has like as you can see, uses class-based components. So this might just be a very old library, which might be the reason it made it very difficult for you to introduce this into your project. Most libraries will be very modern and compatible, and one line of code you bring it in. For example, I was recently trying to bring in a code editor, which is very similar to this, right? You are bringing in a rich text editor to your project. I was bringing in a code editor. I read through this code of, what is it called, Monaco React editor, this thing right here. 2 lines of code, it brings a code, this thing like this into your project. So yeah, this library that you're looking at is a little too archaic. So it's not your fault. OTP inbox I have written it. I will make video on React assignments, specifically this one, and then there's another one people wanted. I've written it as soon as I get the time. I'm working on a stock analysis chatbot in Next.js. I was asked to make a functionality where the chatbot can do an analysis of a company stock and give pros and cons, particular to that company, like screener.in. Can you give some advice? So how do you want to do stock analysis? What does screener.in do? Let's see. Search for a stock. Let's say Tesla. And it depends on how they want it. What are the sources for you to make this prediction on? Is it news? Is it previous stock prices? You should be provided with some sort of an algorithm, right? This is how you will compute whether it's a good buy or not. And if that's not provided, then it's less of a developer job, more of a PM job for you to figure out, what's the best way to do stock analysis, which, if I'm being honest, shouldn't be the job of a developer. It should be the job of a quant to figure out what the algorithm is to find whether or not the stock is a good pick, and then you just have to codify it. But if you've not been given that, then you have to figure out, whatever the way is to predict a stock, which if you know, then you should be very rich and not be a software developer anyways. But you get the idea. If I had to just, this is your company giving you, try this out as a kiddie project, then news analysis, do a scrape of the internet, find all the news related to this specific company, find the sentiment, find the profits, all that jazz. When is the next earning call of this company, and then uske basis pe try to figure out. All right. Why do companies use data lake when a database can be used for most of the use cases? Scale and adjusted load also get mentioned. Your data lake and places for you to dump data. These problems come when you have a lot of data and you have to do a lot of processing on your data. Databases work for most simple use cases, or simple, what do you call it? Like, not for things that are extremely high throughput data. What is extremely high throughput data? Stocks are a good example. The number of orders that are being placed, if you want to dump them in the end somewhere and do some sort of an analysis, was there, how much buying pressure was there, how much selling pressure was there. It's harder to do on a simple MySQL database. And also, this might not be the core of your application. So you want to defer all of this to, more optimized databases that work on big data. This is the reason you use something like data lake, or some sort of a data dump to dump all of your data for once and eventually analyze it. The data that you don't immediately need, and you need for specified use cases like searching, for example. If you want to be able to search across some data, you probably don't want to dump it into an MySQL database. You want to dump it into something like Elasticsearch, where you can, the goal of that database is not to be your primary store. The goal of your database is to be your search database. You can search very quickly. The Elasticsearch code base has been written in a way where it's very easy for you to search. So yeah, that's the high level of why you want to move beyond SQL databases or NoSQL databases to other sort of databases, because they solve a specific value problem. But most core of your application, user information, for an application like Instagram, the posts, things like these are stored in like some sort of a SQL table. Alrighty, cool here, guys. Let's call it here. Thank you all for joining. Hopefully it was an insightful class. I will, of course, as always, do a poll after this. So let me know if there is any feedback, and if it was all good, then let's continue on this pattern of creating slides on daily code so you guys can follow along faster. All right. Thank you everyone for joining. I will see you guys tomorrow. Let's start with TypeScript tomorrow. Bye bye.